Hello, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are tuning in from around the world. So, in this episode, we're dealing with the final three gateways, and they are the star, the moon, and the sun. But let me review for a second, because I want you to notice something. I'm not doing a full review here. You just go back and watch the videos. That's what they're there for. But I want you to look at something I haven't talked about, and I wanted to wait until now to talk about it anyways. It's all very strategic, of course. So if we go back to the main picture, the overall picture showing everything, and we look at all the 9 gateways, what I really want you to look at, pay attention to the skies, the backgrounds of the skies in all of them. So if we start with the High Priestess, essentially, you get a little bit of the sky in there. It's kind of bluey, and it's basically kind of a morning sky, I guess. Almost like the star. And then the Hierophant is just kind of gray, full. Well, you're indoors, really, but that's to establish midday. And the Hermit, again, we got kind of going darker, and that's dusky. So again, that's the journey of those 3 gateways. Death, Devil, and the Tower, exactly the same way. So we're a little bit darker from the Hermit, and then the Devil we got completely black, and the Tower we got completely black. And those are the 3 gateways where you're essentially dealing with the trials and tribulations of going out into the world with your values and the things you've learned, and dealing with, that's not going to necessarily work. So those are your dark days and your challenges and your obstacles. Can you overcome your obstacles? So finally we get to the star, the moon, and the sun. The star, the moon, and the sun is basically we're kind of waking up again in a lot of ways. As you'll notice, by the time we get to the sun, the background is almost the same color as the Hierophant, so kind of midday. Again, none of this is by accident. It's everything on the card has meaning, and they're meant to provide shortcuts for us, really. But what do these 3 gateways mean? The star, the moon, and the sun. That's what we're going to get into right now. So we came through the trials and the tribulations, the obstacles, and essentially what they mean is, can you let these things go? So leading up to the star, the Devil, the Tower, Death, the Devil, and the Tower. Let's talk about a somewhat common circumstance that I've been through, which is divorce. And divorce is an interesting one because you can really wrap yourself into your ego around this one. You sign on the dotted line and ink your name saying, I am hitched to this person. You spend, obviously a lot of time, but you gain all the accoutrements, wrap all your finances around it until one day, it doesn't have to come, but one day, someday down the line, unfortunately a divorce comes. There's entire industries wrapped around family and being married and stuff like that. There are entire church groups that are wrapped around and really press for family is everything, etc., etc. We see this heavily in what I call the Reformed Christian churches, Protestant churches, Baptists, the mega churches throughout America. We see it heavily across the Hindi culture, big time. If you don't have a family, you're not worth very much, is very much pounded into folks. The Mormons, the same way. I had a really good friend for a very long time, just didn't meet anybody. And if you don't create a family, you're almost shunned by their society. So marriage, kids, all that jazz, for a lot of people, is their entire life, brought on by the environment that they're surrounded in, the culture that they're from, and stuff like that. And when a divorce comes, that's the Tower moment. Well, it's the Devil moment of, this is how attached you are to this circumstance. And the tower is, can you survive not being attached anymore? It drives many people to drink. I unfortunately knew a fellow that took his own life because his marriage ended. It causes change in, locale, everything, but it doesn't need to be the end-all be-all of your life. It really doesn't. And that's where we come to the star. That's why the star is next after the tower. It's a very good example of why. And the star represents hope. The star also represents kind of creativity as well, and a bit of intuition. We get more into intuition in the moon. So the star is the recognition that you can go on. I mean, it is hope in the most extensive way. The star is, the light in the darkness, the light at the end of the tunnel, the realization that there is more inspiration, there is something positive out there, and it is the faith that you can garner in yourself to get through the rest of what you're going through. The moon is interesting because the moon is intuition, but in this case, it's intuition of, wow, how did I do all that? What was it that really, yes, sometimes even blind faith and stuff like that gets you through things, but it is that true voice in your soul, deep down in your body, from your higher consciousness. You're finally starting to hear it. And you know that there's something about yourself that's there even in the darkest days. And that brings in an interesting conundrum. So if we go back to the death, the devil in the tower, this is essentially what we're talking about, is death of ego. Ego being the persona that you put out into the world that you most identify with, you're comfortable with, etc. Ego does not mean arrogance. It means the stories that you build up around yourself and tell yourself about who you are. And eventually, so in that, going back to the example of somebody being married, eventually if that persona or avatar or whatever doesn't exist anymore for you, and yet you're still here, how is that? That, in a lot of ways, is very challenging to a lot of people yet again, much like the Hanged Man. A lot of people you go through a serious obstacle that you think will be life-ending, and it's not. You end up coming through it. You hit, you get your faith, you get your inspiration, you get through it with the star, and the moon's this sudden realization of, hey, how the heck did I do that? Where did that really come from? Oh, there's something inside of me. There's a voice inside of me that's, wait a second, that's really the real me. That's what the moon's all about. Finally getting in touch with that. Some people are really lucky and they are in tune with themselves from birth. Most people are not. Even if you're very lucky, because I went through something when I had several surgeries when I was little, unfortunately. So I had to go through some really tough stuff when I was 10. So I didn't have myself. I didn't have a lot of time to build up an ego of who I was. But if big time tragedy or big time changes come later on in life, you're very settled in your ego. And this is why a lot of people will have what's called a forced awakening after a large tragedy, is because it challenges the ego. And you have this sudden realization, like the moon is teaching you, that there's something more in you. You are not who you thought you were. Because wait a second, my life ended. And yet I'm here. And that's the lesson, is that there's something greater than you. And thus you get the sun. is the final awakening kind of thing. That's essentially what it is. So if we go with the sun, so if we go with the little explanations in a teeny book that comes with a pack of cards, it's happiness, it's success, it's optimism, but it's confidence and truth on the fool's journey of who you are, despite all the circumstances you've been through. And the rewards from that are judgment. Now, the judgment's the first reward. And when we talk about judgment, let's swap that word because there's too many negative connotations towards that word in our culture. Let's swap the word judgment for discernment, which I've talked about several times in the Getting Started in Spirituality video, and I think one other, I can't remember. But discernment is heavily important. It's a gift that you get for going through trials and tribulations and coming out roses from it. And discernment allows you to know, okay, this is what can cause bad situations. This is what can cause good situations. That's what they mean by judgment. Is the ability to understand how something will affect your life. The understanding of when there might be a wolf in sheep's clothing in front of you. I was reading in one of the ancient grimoires the other day, the Book of Abramelin, if you get deeper into all this stuff, which we can talk about later. You do end up reading ancient texts. And in the Book of Abramelin, page 37 in the Dan and Guth edition, he's talking about Belial. Belial is one of the kings of the underworld, and how Belial leads people astray. And going through trials and tribulations of the devil, the death devil in the tower, you get this discernment, this judgment, and you're able to tell when, like I said, a wolf in sheep's clothing is in front of you. You'll be able to tell when something highly disguised will lead you astray from your path. And leading you astray really is all about what it was saying there in the Book of Abramelin. Leading you astray is really all about making sure you don't achieve any wisdom. That's what Belial likes to do. Belial likes to dumb people down and confuse them. And having that discernment, having that judgment ahead of time can prevent another type of tower moment. Now, the interesting thing is the tower moment doesn't necessarily actually have to be bad. That's another lesson of the moon and the sun. Something that you get from judgment's the lesson, discernment's the lesson, the reward and the wisdom that you get from this realization from the moon and the sun. Hey, who am I really? Oh, I'm this. That realization is, that final realization is the sun. A tower moment and, a sun realization moment can be, I was wrapped up in this thing, and actually I was making mountains out of molehills, kind of thing. It was a storm in a teacup. It really didn't matter that much to me. So the first thing that comes to mind is social media, kind of thing. Some people, my stepdaughter, you could be sitting at the dinner table, and unfortunately prying the phone out of her hands was difficult. But you could be sitting at the dinner table, the mood in the room is one way, and she'd get something over social media and she'd go storming off, completely upset about God knows what, piped into her directly through social media. That happens to millions of people. And there will come a time when you have to have that realization that, hey, that isn't me. That isn't the entirety of my existence. I was actually having a good moment. And I chose to allow, that negativity in. I chose to have a different experience than what was actually going on in the room. That's another thing about discernment. So the sun and judgment, essentially what we're talking about is awakening. Ta-da! So what do you get from awakening? So your final card on the journey of the Fool, in the major arcana that is the world. So the world just stands for completion. The world is your eyes completely open to everything and every opportunity around you. And all the negative things too. Let's talk about awakening for a moment. There's a lot of confusion from folks about what happens after an awakening. And there are several awakenings. I would say, and if we come back out here to the main picture, there are several awakenings. You can have what I call an initial awakening, which is the realization, oh, there's a tower moment. I went through something. My identity's changed, yet I'm kind of still here. And then you get sucked back in to who you are, whatnot. And you don't quite get the full realization. So there's that. Awakening kind of ebbs and flows in a lot of ways. But if you have a full awakening, so you get to the world, you see all the opportunities, the positive, the negative, the everything. That doesn't mean that there isn't bullshit in the world anymore. That doesn't mean you can't get hurt. Having an awakening doesn't mean that your life is going to be all peaches and cream. That surprises a great many people because there is still the world out there. And this is when you start getting questions like, how come God allows for suffering? How come we can't just get the entire world to awaken? And a really good example, I can't remember if it's in the Book of Abramelin or if it's in, I can't remember which grimoire right now. One of the lines simply states, where there are groups of people, there are sin. Don't think of sin as in the Catholic sense. Think of it more in the classic archery sense, because that's where the term sin comes from, if you didn't know. Sin basically means the missing the target. That's all. So where there are people, there is sin. Means there's whole loads of people not hitting things quite on the mark, getting a lot of things wrong. As they say, to err is human. So you put a whole bunch of humans together, you're going to get a whole lot of mistakes. That doesn't mean you isolate yourself. Awakening just means you're prepared for that. You understand that there will be tons of people missing the mark on so many different things. Missing the mark on, how to treat others. Missing the mark on, acceptable social behavior. Missing the mark on even things in their own life. To err is human. Another nice example, big one that catches people off guard. You hit the world, you hit your awakening. That doesn't mean you're perfect. You could get wrapped up. The ego can come back. If there was an ego card in the deck, it would be the devil, as in that which you are overly attached to. Remember the video clip of the movie Jacob's Ladder from the last video I put up, where it said the devils are really just burning away the parts of your life that you're overly attached to. So that's what the ego is over attachment to any identity. And some people who go through an awakening become overly attached to being awakened. The ego is very, very smart that way. So then if you're in the spiritual community, never really considered whether I am or not, but if you're in the spiritual community, you will meet tons of people that are holier than thou, or as my partner likes to say, more worthy than others. We're more worthy. Or there's a lot of judgment. I was listening to Denis, better known as The Foolish Fish, the other day. Great channel. A lot to learn there. But I was listening to the guy that runs The Foolish Fish YouTube channel the other day, and he was saying there's so much judgment in the spiritual community, in the magical community, because he mainly studies grimoires. And that's the return of the ego. So just because you've hit the world, just because you've hit an awakening, doesn't mean you'll be there. This whole fool's journey can be repeated multiple times over in your life. Depends, I would say, on how much you lean on that judgment, on that discernment. Depends how much you kind of keep an eagle eye, mostly on yourself, on the devil card, the return of the ego that creates that over-attachment to who you are. That's what causes, I would say, the fool's journey to begin with. Because as you're going along, so we go back to the start and you get that first gateway of the magician realizing you need to use your tools, and then you realize you need to care for yourself and you need to have some structure in your life, the emperor. You can get overly attached to the tools, to the how you're treating yourself, to what your structure is. Those things will change throughout your time on this plane. And just because they're working doesn't mean they're the only way. Just because they're working doesn't mean it's right, even sometimes. Sometimes you could be leaning into those things and it's ruining the lives of others and you're just too busy to notice. Happens a lot. So the world is an awfully complicated card. It does stand for completion and all that jazz. And let's break down something on the world card that most people ignore. I don't hear it very much in many of the breakdowns on YouTube. So you see the woman in the center, and she's surrounded by the wreath, which is glory, basically success. But outside the circle are 4 symbols. You have a picture of a man, an eagle, the bull, and a lion, which doesn't have much context in our modern day society. So I think it gets glossed over a lot. What the heck do these mean? Why are they on the world card? Well, the ox, most classically, can also represent God, God himself, God's immanence. I'm creating my own tarot deck, and one of the things on it is the Fool card, and the Fool's being pulled by an ox. In the classic texts, for instance, the Bible and all the classic grimoires, and many of the legends, God does appear as an ox because it's strong. There's a fervency, a zeal for life, a passion, and it's the lifeblood of your time here on earth. But also, the ox is seen as patient and diligent and powerful. And that's what you are from going through all these trials and tribulations. So that's why it's on the world card. One of the next symbols is the eagle. And the eagle represents courage and fortitude, much like the lion, but also more specifically, it represents your spirit. It represents the strength of your spirit. And also being a master of the air being action. So we're going to tie these into what do you know? The 4 worlds, the 4 symbols here in a minute, the 4 elements, that is. After the eagle is the lion, and the lion has had a long existence in symbology, much like the ox. So the lion is seen as the king of beasts on the ground, just like the eagle supreme in the air. And the lion represents courage, valor, again, power, royalty, dignity, and justice. And finally, you have another symbol on there, on the Rider-Waite-Smith upper left, is a symbol of the man. And humans represents the emblem of intelligence, which is basically you are a gift from God to be a steward on this earth above all other creatures. Again, that doesn't mean you be a dick about it or anything like that. But yeah, you are here to be a steward on this earth, or more like of this earth. So if we tie them all together, and this will lead us nicely into the minor arcana, there might be some arguments amongst the practitioners. I'm sure there will be, but hey, whatever. But breaking this down, so the ox traditionally was often shown on a banner centuries ago of scarlet, representing in the four worlds, which we'll get into more Kabbalah stuff later on in other videos. The first world, Atzilith, this world is attributed to the ox, as I described before, because it's all about God's immanence, God's will in creating the universe, his passion. And in tarot, this world corresponds with the suit of wands, because as we all know, or you're about to learn, wands are all about passion. And in the classic or more pure studies of Hermetic Kabbalah and traditional Kabbalah, this world is associated with the color red, and thus the element of fire. The next world, Bria, is represented by the eagle from the world card. It stands for God's creation of the universe. These are ideas for formulating things and is represented by the suit of cups, which is why cups are all about creativity and emotion, and why this world is most often associated with the color blue. After that comes Yetzirah, which means formation in Hebrew. Maybe some of you more hardcore researchers out there have read what is called the Sefer Yetzirah, which translates from Hebrew to the Book of Formation. To form something means to take action, and in tarot this corresponds with the suit of swords and is represented by the lion from the world card, as well as the color yellow, which is another reason why when you look at the strength card in the classic Rider-Waite-Smith, the lion and the woman are basking in a bright yellow daylight. The fourth world is Asaya. Now, not everything fits nicely in a clean box in Kabbalah, but as we all learned in grade school, and it never escaped me when studying all this, if you mix the colors yellow and blue, they of course make green, and green is associated with the fourth world, Asaya, represented by the pentacles, and on the world card, the image of the human. And this is where man and intelligence comes from. So those are all on the world card. And the reason that they're on the world card is so during your awakening, you begin to understand how all these four things play together, where God's immanence comes from, the spirit of not only just man's spirit, but the spirit for creating life, and then how life was structured, and then your place in that structure. That's what all those four symbols stand for. And that's what you should get from an awakening. Doesn't mean that you're perfect. Doesn't mean that things can't go wrong after that. It just means you now have the judgment or discernment to understand how all these things play together. So from that, again, that's the other reason that we now go towards the minor arcana is because we're going to split up the meanings of the different elements in each of the arcana and the microcosms of the journey of each of those elements. So we'll get to those in another episode. So I hope this helps. I hope it made sense. We're getting, especially the world card can be quite esoteric, but hopefully I was able to use some common circumstances that can help you attribute to the meanings of each of these cards. If you have any questions, of course, you can always just comment below, contact me through the website, tarotpathwork.com, or over on Reddit, I'm Taoist360. Until next time.